Hey, welcome back, developers. So, I hope you have tried to complete yourself the game. If not, it's fine. We will continue together. All right. So, we have initialized all the necessary variables we need, and then the elements have been assigned into like certain variables. So, now we have the basic setup complete, right? So, the next step would be combining these two icons array and then shuffling them. So on a random order, we will shuffle them so that we will have a unique combined array that we can use to display the cards. So for that, we will shuffle the array first. We will create an empty array so that we can combine the first icons and icons to array. So inside that, I will create a shuffled icons variable, which will call the shuffle function. And then that shuffle function will use a concat method. What concat method does is I will explain in a second. So it will take two arguments, icons and then the icons to array. So what this does is that, let's say, instead of calling the shuffle icon array, shuffle function, I will cut this and then console.log. Okay, so let's do this and then check what the output is. All right. So if you notice, it has a total of 20 elements, and then that 20 elements are the combination of the icons and then the icons to array, right? So what this concat function does is it takes two arrays and then see, as you can see, combines two or more arrays. This method returns a new array without modifying any existing arrays. So the total existing array will not be modified, but that will be returned as a card values. So this combined value will be stored in the card values array, right? So I'm going to be giving this single array into the shuffle function. So shuffle function will take a single value, which is the concatenated icons and icons to array. Now we need to write the shuffling function. So I'm going to be using a Fisher-Yates algorithm, which I found on the internet. So you don't necessarily need to use this same algorithm. You can also come up with your idea or any algorithm you find which you prefer. So for now, I'm going to be using this particular algorithm, which is like fairly easy. So we have the shuffle function, and then it's taking the input as a single array. And then inside that, I'm going to be looping through that array first. So let I equal to, let's start from the array.length part. So array.length -1. So what it does is it looks for this array, and then the total length is 20. 20 minus 1 is basically 19. And then I'm going to be saying until you need to repeat this loop until the ith value is greater than 0. So if the ith value is actually equal to 0 or less than 0, then you need to break the loop. And then I'm going to be minusing the value on each loop completion. So in the beginning, ith value will be 19, and then it will check, okay, if 19 is greater than 0, yes, it is. And then it will execute whatever the condition we have written inside. And then after the loop, it will reduce the value. The next time it will be, ith value will be 18. So it will continue until the ith value is greater than, is equal to 0 in this case. Okay. And then I'm going to be defining another variable called const j, and then I'm going to be using the math library, which is by default included in JavaScript. And then math library has two functions. I mean, it has so many functions, but the ones we are going to be using are ceil or floor. So in this case, I'm going to be going with floor. What ceil does is like it will round off to the highest value near, and then this floor will return the lowest value near to the decimal value if it's returning a decimal value. And then I'm going to be also using a math.random function. What it does is it will randomly select a number, and then in order to be inside our range, I'm going to be multiplying with our I plus 1 value. So we don't want 0th value, that's why we are doing I plus 1 over here. So if you notice, if you do console.log j I comma j, see, it starts from ith value is 19, but the random value is 1. 18, the random value is 3. So each time it's giving you a random value. So that's actually working as expected. All right. So now once you have it, what we're going to do is we're going to take the array, the complete array, right? And then we're going to be saying that, okay, I have the array of ith element and then comma array of jth element. And then I'm going to be exchanging these values. That's it. That's all I'm going to do over here. Array of ith element. So this will necessarily shuffle the whole array. If you look at it, let's check if it's actually shuffling it. Okay, I'm going to be printing array of I, comma, array of j, and then comma, array of j, comma, array of I. And then I will also print the I and j value for reference. Const j, 29th line, math wrote random. Okay. Okay, the semicolon was missing inside. That's why it threw out an error. Okay, so in this case, I have this, right? So in the beginning, if you see, the first one is array of I and array of j. You are necessarily exchanging the value, that is array of j comma I, and then saving it as the current value. So you repeat this particular step and you will have a shuffled array. Let's check if we have a shuffled array or not. Console.log array. So as you can see, there is nothing which is actually nearer to each other. So that nearer to each other can also happen in certain times. So each time you will get a different result. If you look at it, see the penguin is in the first, and then if you refresh, you will get another value. Now the fox is in the first value. So the shuffling is actually working, which is actually a good news. And then we are going to be returning that shuffled array to the shuffled icons variable. So now we have the shuffled array at our hands. And then the next button would be adding an event listener to the restart or start button. So event listener will listen for any click events that's happening on the button so that we can actually start the game. Right, restart button. So we have already assigned the restart button to a variable. So we can just directly use restart button dot add event listener. Then we will listen for the click event. And inside the click event, if the click event triggers, I need to call a function. So in this case, I will call a function called restart game. And then I will write the function for the game to be restarted. So in this case, function restart game. And it doesn't necessarily need to take any of the variable as input because we have all of this already as a global variable what we need. So initially what we do is that we will declare a variable called let message, and then we will ask him, like, do you want to start the game, right? So if he's starting for the first time, then you should ask, okay, do you want to start the game, right? And then we will also check, this is the additional step. Let's say in this case, he's already playing it, right? And then if you want to start the game fresh, then we need to ask that, okay, all current progress will be lost. Do you want to continue? So these cards, this condition will only come if the number of cards is greater than 0. So that also we can be included in this particular scenario by checking by if cards dot length is greater than 0, then we will change the message element to all current progress will be lost. Do you want to continue? Okay, so now you have that, and then we will create a variable called result. And then for this to happen, so this is the browser default alert box or confirm box. This is particularly confirm box. I think you have already seen the alert box that can be found in the JavaScript basics. If you haven't seen it, I will link you to the description so that you can go through the basics part of over there. And then this window, each browser window object has two functions called, it has so many functions if you look through it, but the one we are going to be using is called conform. So if you go through it, I hope we can find it over here. So it's not there anyway. So window.conform. So as you can see, it's there, right? It's a method. So that particular method takes a single argument, which is a message string. So we already have our string defined as a message variable. So we'll just use that. And then if the gamer clicks on the OK button, then it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So we will just need to look at, okay, if res, which is like if basically if it's true, then we need to start the game. Otherwise, don't do anything, just go back. That's it, right? So we need to create the logic for the starting the game. So start the game. So inside the start game function, we have to actually initialize all the timer and then the cards. We need to display the cards as well, right? So for that, I'm gonna be creating the function first, start game. I also don't necessarily need to take any variable as input because like we already have everything as a global variable. So inside the start game, we will use another function called create cards. So when you write your code, you need to be as modularized as possible. So in that way, you can actually reuse that particular functions if needed in the future. But don't go too in deep. This can be very confusing, but like as time goes on, you'll understand what is exactly where you need to actually modularize. So if you're going to repeat yourself, like if you're going to be copying and pasting the code multiple times, then that's the point where you should actually convert everything to a function, and then you just call the function whenever it's needed. So if you want to create the cards, then we will create the function called create cards, and then we will just use that function throughout this script. All right. So how do we create the cards? We just need to loop through all the shuffled icons and then create a document element and then assign it to it. So we already have the shuffled icon list, right? So here I'm going to be using a for loop, basic for loop, saying that, okay, let I equal to 0, I less than shuffled icons dot length. And then I'm going to be I plus plus. So in each loop, the value of I will be increasing. And then I'm going to define a variable called const card. And then I will create an element of div. So this, if you don't know what is create element and how does it work, you can refer to the JavaScript basics, which I will link in the description. And then what this basically does is it will create a div element. That's it. And then inside the div element, we can add a class to it. So I'm going to be adding a class called card. So we will use class list. So div element dot class list add card. So it will have a card class in it. And then the text content of it, we will say it as the shuffled icons of ith element. So that's what the emoji of that at that particular index. And then we will also add an event listener to listen to any of the click event inside the card. So that needs to be happen, like let's say if this click needs to be triggered, we need to add the event listener on top of the card. So click, and then here we will use an anonymous function. Right? It doesn't have any name. I'm just gonna be calling if this click happens, flip the card, not flip cards, flip card, another function with the actual card element. Okay, we need to write this function. What happens? What is the logic behind it, right? And we also have the grid element already in place. So we will append this created card into that grid element. Grid dot append child card. That's it. And we also need to track this card inside the cards array we have created, which is over here, so that as the card numbers goes, the cards array will have all the cards in it. So cards dot push card. That's it. So now you will have When you click on start or restart, then do you want to start the game? It's working. Create, all the cards are there, right? And then if you click on any element, it will give an error saying that, okay, flip card function is not defined. So we need to create the function for flip card. So before going there, let's initialize all the other values as well, right? So let's initialize moves equal to 0 again to make sure that even if you come back after the game, like you have played one game and then the moves value has been modified, and then you want to start the game fresh, then you need to make sure that moves value is still 0. And then the scores value is also 0. And then the score element, so we need to show the score. Like as you can see, there is no score or there is no moves here, like it's visible, right? It's not visible because we have set up the style as none for it. So we have already the score element assigned to a variable, right? So it is actually assigned to, it's hidden, so score element. And then we will access the CSS by using style, and then inside the style we can modify all the styling we want without actually changing the CSS. So style, and then I want to use the display property, and then in this, inside the display property, I will say that, okay, I need you to change the display property of the score element into block. Okay, and then initially I will say that score element dot text content equal to moves of 0. So why am I doing is that we only have one score element. So that score element, in case of the initial phase, it should show move 0. But if the gamer is successful in completing the whole step, then it should show score equal to 0, right? So for that, we can use the same, we can reuse the same element. If the move is successful, if the gamer is successful, then we will replace the text content to score and then the score value. Okay. So that's why I'm using the same variable over here, but initially I'm setting it to moves 0. And then flip cards should be empty as well. Okay, now we have all the cards. In create cards, we have pushed every single card into cards array. So we need to make sure that we have a class called flipped over here, right? And then I have also created a class which we should also create a class called matched that will properly track if it's matched. If both of these cards are matched, it should stay in the front. As you can see over here, if you start the game and then after 5 seconds, let's wait for 5 seconds. If you match these two cards, it should stay in the front without going back. So if you notice, it has a matched class in it. All the other has flip class. So if it's a match class, then it should stay in the front. So in the beginning, none of those class should be there. So we are going to be using a for each on that array, on that cards array, and then we are making sure that, okay, card, each of the card, I'm looping through it, and then I'm going to be removing the flip class and then the matched class. Okay, so you have that, and then each time the game starts, you need to shuffle the game, right? So when you refresh again, you need to shuffle the cards once and again and again. Otherwise, it will always have the same structure throughout. So we need to make sure that we are calling the shuffle cards function, which we haven't written so far. We will write it. So that shuffle cards function, what it does is, it'll just call the shuffle function again. So shuffling the cards and then function shuffle cards, and then shuffled cards equal to shuffle, which we have already defined, and then we will pass the array. So this shuffle we have already defined, right? This function is already here. So if you have all the cards element already prepared, and then you don't have to call the create cards again. and you can just call the shuffle cards. So that will shuffle the cards and then present a new format. And then you just do a for each on top of it, and then make sure that that card is being appended into the grid. Grid dot append child card. So shuffle cards will basically take the whole card and then shuffle it and then append it to the grid over here. Okay, now you have the shuffle card. Then you have to, what you have to do is like, you have to also call the preview timer part. Show preview timer function. So this function, what it does is like, once the game has started, based on the preview timer we have set over here, we should show the card only until that time expires. After that, we have to remove the timer. I mean, we have to flip the cards and then also remove the timer. So show preview timer function, and then we'll give a comment saying that, okay, function display the timer for starting the game. This will review the cards until the timer expires. Okay, and inside the function we will take a copy of the timer we have defined in the card view seconds element. So I'm going to copy that and then paste it over here, so we have a copy of it. And now we will say that time message L, we need to get the time message element. So this time message element is actually the span time element, right? So inside the message element you have a span with a class of time. So we can call the message L dot query selector and then the span dot time. So it makes sure that inside the message element you are getting this span tag and the span tag with the class of time. So now you have the time message element inside here, inside this variable. Now we will also need to show the message element. Like when you start the game, there is no message element being shown over here because in the styles.css we have been hiding it. So we need to show the message element, the same thing, the same CSS format, message.style.display equal to block. Okay, and then we will create an interval. So this is the part where it gets interesting. So we need to assign the set interval variable to the set interval function to another variable so that we can clear it once the interval expires. So set interval is basically a JavaScript function that's providing a functionality that will refresh after every second that passes through, right? So it's following a millisecond pattern. So if you want a millisecond pattern, then you can also use milliseconds as well. So it takes two arguments. One is the function, if you look at it. So it takes a handler function and then the timeout. That's it. Okay. So arguments is there, but we are not going to be looking into it. We are going to be looking into the handler part and then the timeout. So I'm going to be using a arrow function over here, which is anonymous. There is nothing in it. So there is no name for the function. And then I need to repeat the interval every 1 second. So we have a total of 5 seconds we have set up in the card view seconds, right? So every 1 second that timer needs to be updated. So that's why the timer is actually 1000. So this 1000 is actually in milliseconds. Okay, so now we need to update the time message L, and then we will say that, okay, the inner HTML of the time message element should be time to show the card. So the time to show the card, the value of the time to show the card is actually in the beginning it's 5. And then once that's done, I need to reduce the value of time to show the card. So I will do time to show the card minus minus. Now the value of the time to show the card is 4. And then we will also need to check if time to show the card is actually less than 0. Right? It will run until the value is equal to 0. If it's less than 0, then we need to hide all the cards. We will create a function for that. And then we also need to clear the interval. So clear interval is basically a JavaScript function that will clear the interval based on the time you give to based on the name you give to it. So we have set up the set interval, assigned it to a variable called timer interval, and then we are going to be clearing it using the timer interval part. Okay. So once this part is done, basically message L needs to go away. So message L, the use of message L has been done because the preview time is over. Now we need to show the gamer time, right? Game timer. So for that to happen, we will make the display of message element to none during the end of the preview timer. Okay. So this function will basically should run. I mean, let's check. If you start the game, and then yeah, so your game will start in 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then it should hide. So it's not hiding because hide all cards, the function is not there. So let's create a function for hiding all the cards. Function hide all cards. Okay. And inside that function, we will loop through all the cards we have at hand. Cards dot for each, and then each card will be taken as an argument, and then we will add a class list of flipped on top of it. So class list add flipped. Okay. And then we will also call the start game timer, because game timer is the function that needs to be running the game timer we had. Instead of this, your game will start in 5 seconds. You should display your game will end in certain set of time, right? So we will call that particular function once this is done. So let's check if the hide all cards part is working. So start or restart, and then your game will start in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. So it's working. Now we need to show the game timer part. So that will be explained, and the clickable part of each of this will be explained in the next episode. So try to figure out if you can do it about the creating the start game timer. Try to complete this particular function. If you're not able to do it, then we will see you in the next episode. Until then, keep coding.